designers will set it to 100% always, so they make sure that what they're seeing on the screen is exactly what they're creating. So that's just a little tip right there, because a lot of our screens do scale, and when you drop things on bigger and bigger screens, you kind of have to zoom in more to just be able to read it. Like if you have like a 4K TV, I mean, you know what that means, right? There's 4,000 pixels going top to bottom. I put a 16 pixel font on it there. That looks like an ant when you're standing on top of the Empire State Building. It's basically unusable, you know? So you kind of have to zoom your screen to see this stuff. All right, so I'm just giving you that as kind of a thing. The other thing that you need to be aware of is what is the most common screen size for people? I know they talk about this later at some point, but most people are looking on phones now. Yeah, that's kind of a thing. Although some phones have higher resolutions, they kind of scale themselves. So when you're working on a big screen, you don't necessarily want to design for a big screen. You always want to be thinking about the little screen that people might be using. So sometimes you'll work with your browser not open all the way in your desktop, because that's how most people will be looking at it anyhow. It also explains why you go to so many websites and the content part of it, like most of the words, are narrowed up in the middle, because most people don't have screens that big that they're looking at it with, especially if you're on a phone or a tablet or something like that. So things to consider and things to know. But to kind of give you the baseline, now notice that there's also these other systems for sizing. My preference as a designer has always been to work with pixels, because pixels are actually the pixels on your screen. So if it's 16 pixels high, that's like a finite thing. Now when you switch to the other measurements, it becomes a little grayer. So like when we work in Microsoft Word and we select a font, the default font size is considered 12-point font. And I forget what the actual formula is for that, but it's like how many characters appear in like 1 inch of text or something weird like that. That's kind of like the overview of it. But in terms of declaring a point size for a screen, you would declare 12-point if you want a 16-point font. But my advice to you is not to use points when you're doing web pages. Points are really designed for print. But the fascinating thing is with CSS, and this is something you should know, you can actually set up a style sheet for people viewing your website. So if they decide to go and print the screen, you can set up separate CSS for that point document. Isn't that kind of interesting? And if that's the case, that's when you use points. Otherwise, I suggest you strongly avoid them, because it does not correspond to a pixel size, it corresponds to a print size. Now the other ones that you see here, the M and the percentage, can be useful. Now what those are, that's relative sizing. So what that means is, depending on what you've declared as a base font size, I can say, for example, on my page, the default font size, let's say I don't like 16, it's too small. I say my default font size is 20 pixels. And then I come along and say that this font is 150%. And what that'll do is it will scale itself to be 50% bigger than whatever my base font size is. So the only place that you should really use the percentage or the M, because basically M's are percentages without the extra zeros, is when you're doing relative font sizes based upon a base font size. And I'll show you that principle. It's a little hard to latch onto initially. But sometimes that's pretty useful. So if I set like a standard font size for my page, and then I know if I want this part to just be 150% bigger, it'll create an effect without actually having to do the math to figure out what that is. So you can kind of like automatically scale things. Now you can use the M's, and if you notice that 0.75 is 75%, and 1.5 is 150%, et cetera. It's basically a percentage system when you use M's. So you'll see a lot of web pages when they have a base font size set that the coders will often use M's to describe the increase or decrease in size. And it's kind of a subjective thing. The text values for sizing are also tied directly to these. And frankly, folks, I recommend that you kind of avoid those. Okay, that's my personal preference. I think it's better to do it mathematically because then you have a tangible amount. The other thing that's interesting is you don't have to stick with this chart. You know, if this chart goes from like 1 to 0.75, you can do like 0.82 if you want. Why not? It's just math. So it gives you a much finer gradation of control. All right. I want to actually try a couple of these things, but we'll do that kind of like all in one fell swoop. The next thing that you'll learn about is the font family property. And this is kind of an interesting thing if you've never formally learned this. When we looked at the page and I zoomed way in on that text, I pointed out that it was Times Roman. And you'll see Times Roman on this chart falls into what we call the serif font category, which means text with little decorations. Okay? So, and other ones that fit into that category are listed there, like Georgia and Times. And then we have the sans serif fonts, like Arial, Verdana, Geneva. There's many of them. And just so you know, my eyes tend to prefer the sans serif fonts. I just think they look more modern. That's just my thing. But sometimes, you know, you want to go to the more old-fashioned looking one because maybe you're doing, I don't know, like a Wild West page or something, and you want that old-fashioned look, right? Or you want it to look like old print. And you can kind of intermix them. The next one, monospace, that's kind of interesting. That basically, the Courier font in particular, is the one that was developed to look exactly like an old-fashioned typewriter. The thing that happens on old-fashioned typewriters is that every character that you would hit, all the letters took up the same amount of space, regardless of what the letters were. And so if you look at the letter, let's say M, right? And then you look at the letter I, they actually are taking up the same amount of space on the screen. Now, the reason I do this in Notepad++ is because Notepad++ and all coding engines, the text that they use has to be monospace. Okay, so all coding engines use monospace fonts. It might not be Courier, it might be like some console font or Lucida console or something like that. But that can be kind of leveraged in a way too to create a look, an old-fashioned code look. So a lot of times when people want stuff to look like code on a page, they use monospace fonts, right? You also have some cursive fonts that you can use. So they have like script fonts and the dreaded Comic Sans. And I say Comic Sans because professional designers see you using Comic Sans, and the first thing they do is go, this guy doesn't know how to code. That looks terrible, right? So just a fair word of warning. It might be fun to use with your friends in an email. You should not use it professionally. Just a piece of advice. All right, that final category, fantasy one, that's where you get into these really weird fonts. But I'm going to tell you what happens when you start to use stuff in the cursive and fantasy category. You run into the issue on various platforms that the fonts are not the same. And why we declare fonts in HTML pages like what you're seeing at the bottom of the page here is because I cannot count on the fact that this font that I chose is absolutely going to exist on my Mac, my PC, my new computer, my old computer, my tablet, my Xbox, you know, whatever device or platform you're using. And I mean, it has gotten much better. I will say that. It has gotten much better to the point where these days I can say there's many fonts that I know will work on just about any platform. But in the old days, on a PC, we would have Times New Roman. And you go to a Mac, and it was Times Roman. Similar, not the same, similar. I would do Arial on a PC, and the Mac didn't have Arial. They had Helvetica. And to this day, most PCs don't have Helvetica. So this is why we do this when we declare a font family. We don't typically declare just one font. We actually declare what we call fallbacks. All right, so the typical thing that we do is we declare the font we want, usually for a PC format, a backup font, typically for a Mac format. Now here they're using Verdana, which is actually a PC font. So in the past we used to go Arial, Helvetica, and then we also declare the generic font family, just in case neither one of those is there. So when the page loads up and it's trying to find the font for a paragraph, it'll go through that list one by one and go, do we got Arial? Great, let's go with that. Oops, don't have that. Do we have Verdana? Sure, let's load that. Don't have that either? Well, what do you have for sans serif? Just give me what you got. So that's why often when we do this kind of design, we declare various fonts. So why don't we go ahead and actually add that code. I'm going to see if I can just copy it right from here if it'll let me. Won't even change to an I-beam. So I guess I'm going to type it in manually. So let's go back to our document, folks. And I'm going to add that to the paragraphs. So I'm going to say, let's see, font family, put in a colon, and I'm going to say Arial. I'm going to go with Helvetica, personally. You can use the one that was there. And then you can do sans serif. And notice that one does have a dash in it. And mine scrolled, right, because I'm running out of screen space there. And then I'll bring up this one here. I'll make it jump over to the other side. Got to make sure I save this. I didn't save it. And I'll come over here and refresh. Now watch the fonts in the paragraph. So the same ones that are red, notice how they just changed. Now, to my eyes, I like that font better. I just think it looks cooler. I think it's a little more modern and easier to read. You want to try a different one? All you have to do is change it, but you have to know what the font names are. That's one of the tricks. So let's try Verdana. Verdana tends to be a little bit wider font. So if I come back over here and refresh now, oops. Come over here and refresh. I always liked that one a lot. I thought that was very readable. But, that's my eyes. You might look at it and hate it, and that's fine. What a lot of designers will do, frankly, is instead of applying the style directly to a paragraph, really, maybe I want my whole site to have that font, right? I would do something like this. And I might actually eliminate it from here, because if I put it in the body, it covers the whole document, right? So I can save it, come back over and refresh, and now the whole site is that. I think that has a much more modern look. You might disagree. I think it's a much more readable font. Then if I wanted to come in and selectively change stuff, right, I could copy this down here and then change the font. So if I wanted to, let's say, do comic, and I always forget, Comic Sans, is that hyphenated? No. It's not hyphenated, which I think is kind of problematic in itself. And they say Comic Sans MS. I'm just going to say Comic Sans. And then what was the category for that one? Cursive. So that's my fallback. And that's just going to go out in the paragraphs now. Yeah, whatever. I'll let you be your own judge. And frankly, you got to play with it. There are lists of fonts that they consider safe for the web. However, it is absolutely possible to get very specific fonts on your page. I'm not going to demonstrate it this week, but there's online font repositories where you can get really particular ones and really cool, bizarre ones that you can throw in there. Like you might have like, you want like the Star Wars font, it's out there. You want like the Coca-Cola font, it's out there. Whatever. People have like gone to great lengths to create them and share them, and then you can actually link to them into your web page. I would prefer, for the most part, that you always use the web-safe fonts if you're ever doing anything. Once again, that's professional. Web-safe fonts are always considered a better bet. If you're trying to get a really particular look, then you can start to bring in some of those strange ones. Some of it is just a matter of playing with it, folks. All right. They give a couple of examples here, and I'm not going to follow their example precisely, but you could if you wanted. If you wanted to just grab this code and drop it into your style area, you can create the look that they have there. So they went through and they actually styled the body font separately, the H1, the H2 separately, and then they also did the ULs and the paragraphs separately. And you know what? I'm going to demonstrate a couple of these techniques. I'm going to do it a little different than this, but I'm going to demonstrate these techniques. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is in the body area, I've kind of declared, because it's in the body that covers the whole page, that's my base font. Okay, because it's at the root of the document. I'm also going to declare a base size. I'm going to say font size. And I'm actually going to go 18 pixels. Well, because I'm working on screen and I want it to be a little readable. Normally it would be 16. If you don't want to change that, you don't have to put anything in. All right, so I'm going to say, let's go with 18. Bring up that window again and do a refresh. So it got a little bit bigger. Everything got a little bit bigger. I'm going to go ahead and do some of the clever things they did. And I'm going to add some additional things to this. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do, one thing I noticed is for ULs, right, the unordered lists, that would include this little menu here, they made it bold. So they did this. So they said font weight bold. That's one thing it can do. Save it, watch the menu area, refresh, all became bold. Now, could I have gone in there and put bold tags around everything? Yeah. Could I have gone into each tag and added a style to do it bold? Yep. Isn't it so much easier just to do it from the embedded style sheet? Changes the whole document? So everything that's a UL changes automatically? That's much better, right? It's a lot easier. The other thing that I might do is I'm noticing this block quote. I don't like the look of that, right? So I'm going to actually apply style to the block quote. And you know what I think would look really nice there is actually the block quote. Maybe that font style on that could be italic. Let's try that first. We're going to do this one step at a time. Refresh. Looks a little nicer, I think, right? What also looked kind of good with that is maybe I could change the color, and instead of it being black like it currently is, or whatever the gray color that it is, I might make it like a really kind of lighter gray. So I might go with like maybe I'll do like the CCCCC. Save it. Refresh. So you guys see like how ineffective that is? All right. Yeah, that wasn't a good call. Let's try like all A's. And sometimes you just kind of have to play with it like that a little bit. Okay. The other thing I might do with it is, you know what? I'm going to make it a little smaller. So I'm going to say font dash size, and I'm not going to declare pixels here. I'm going to declare a percentage in the form of an M, and I'm going to say 0.8, let's go 0.8 M, like that. If you want, you can put the 0 in front. Doesn't really matter, but 0.8 M. Save it. That means it's going to be 80% of the base font size that I declared here, whatever it is now. Come back over and refresh. A little bit smaller. So you see the tweaks I'm making, right? And very subjective, depending on what you're doing. And some of it is really kind of a choice that you're going to make based on whatever kind of thing you're working on. You got to play with it, folks, to get the look you want. And what I would recommend is just experiment to your heart's content until you get the look that you're trying to achieve by whatever means necessary. Now I'm noticing the footer, that's all like, I don't want it red, frankly. In fact, you know what? What would be kind of nice in my eyes is if the whole footer area had a different background color. So I'm going to change the background color. What would look good there? How about I make it kind of dark? In fact, I know that black is all zeros. So maybe if I did like a nearly black kind of thing, all threes. Let's try that first. Okay. I don't like the red text on top of it now. So now we got to change text color. So for color, you know what? I think the text would probably look good in white. Saving it, refreshing. It's not working. Why is it not working? Oh, yeah. Because it's a paragraph. That's why it's not working. So just so you understand what's going on here, in the footer, I was able to style the footer, right? But because this is a paragraph and sits inside of it, the paragraph has its own style where it's set to red. Because I set the footer to have white text, the paragraph overrides it. There's our cascade, folks. This is an example where the more specific element will override the more general one. That's what's happening here. So if you get that kind of effect, now watch what I'm going to do, is I'm just going to type in some nonsense here, right? So it's text inside the footer, but it's not inside the paragraph. Now watch down below as I refresh. That text is white. Isn't that interesting? Now, you might say to yourself, well, gosh, I hate that look. Maybe if I change my paragraph tag to a div tag, so I'm going to change it to a div, then I also have to change the closing one to a div. And then inside the div tag, I'm also going to say style equals. Well, actually, I'm not going to do it there. That's not what I was going to do. I was going to type a class statement and call it, I don't know, foot text. I'm just kind of making up a name. All right. Then I'm going to copy that, come up to the top here. I'll go back to the code, so don't worry about that. And now I'm going to put in, we haven't taught you this technique yet, but I'm going to put in a period, the name I just created, and then I'm going to take that color white and drop it in between here, save it, come back, refresh, and now the stuff that's inside that paragraph tag, or that div tag, notice how that changed? A class or ID. We haven't really covered that topic yet, but I'm just kind of giving you a little advance warning, I suppose, if you want to look at it that way. All right, I'm going to go back now. So this takes a little bit of experimentation, but if you want like a starting point, what you could do, very frankly, is you could come in here and just copy the styles that they have there as a starting point, apply it to your own document, and just tweak from there. very simplistic little things that they're doing that makes it look, a little better, a little more readable, a little more, pizzazz to it. All right, let's play with some of these other settings here and goof around with them a little bit. All right, I'm not going to probably cover all of them, but I'll try to cover most of them. So let's try line height. All right, so line height will change the height between the lines. In fact, that's not a bad one for making a document a little bit more readable. Now, let me explain what line height is first. The line height is the amount of space that a line of text occupies on the screen. So every line of text has a little bit of space above it and a little bit of space below it. And there's like a default amount that's relative to the font that you're using and the structure that you're using. So I can actually leverage that and usually do it in the form of a percentage or an M. So it has like whatever its default is. But usually I find often that it's better to increase the line height. So I might do something like 1.2 M. That's a percentage. So it's going to be 120% of regular line height inside of the paragraph. If I go back to this screen and do a refresh, watch the paragraphs. They have the red text. Watch them. Now, this is the weird part. They got smaller, not bigger, right? Which tells you that the default is actually higher than 1.2. They're actually ratcheting that within the paragraph already. So actually to get more space out of it, I actually need to go much higher. It's probably more in the range of like 1.8. Let's save that. Now let's refresh. And now it looks a little bit more like double spaced. It helps to fill up the screen a little bit. It also makes it a little bit easier to read. This is the setting you have to play with because you're always fighting against whatever the default styles are for a paragraph. We'll talk about that. A lot of tags have default styles built in, and often you're trying to override them. That was line height. Next one they want us to look at is text align. Oh, hey, that's a cool one. This one, to demonstrate it, I'm going to actually think about this. I'm actually going to apply this inline, and for a reason, because I don't want to put it on everything. So I'm going to take, let's say, my bottom-most paragraph here. So here's where it starts. And I'm going to apply the style inline. And so I'm going to say text align. And one of the most common ones you see for this is center. Okay, that's the most common one you tend to see. And I'm going to save it. And once again, I'm going to bring my screen up, and it's going to change this bottom paragraph. And here's my refresh. So now it's not lining up to the left margin. You guys see this? All the lines are lining up in the center of the screen. And so now it's got like hanging indents on either side. This can be a very useful thing. So you can use it to align your text in the center of the screen. Maybe that's not really the best one to align center, but that's an example of inline. Maybe the best one to align center maybe is a title, right? That I can do right up here because don't I have an H1 style up here? Hey, I don't. So why don't I put one up here? Let's put in a H1, and I'm going to say text align colon center spelled correctly. If I don't spell it correctly, it won't work. You guys know that. If you don't, you're going to find out the hard way. But I'm telling you in advance. So I'm going to refresh. Oops, don't refresh here. Here. And there's Mr. Robot. No. Hey, not too bad. Kind of dig it. Right? You know what? That's a title, right? Why don't we say font size. Now there's whatever font size it is currently right now, I want to make it bigger. You know what? I'm going to try a different sizing approach. I'm going to say 150% of whatever it is right now. Come back, refresh. That is not what I expected. What is it sizing against? It's sizing against my 18 pixels. It actually got smaller. So if I'm going relative to my base font size, I might actually have to go up to like, I don't know, 250% of the base font size to get the look I'm looking for. Got to play with it. If I'm not happy with doing it as a percentage, you know what? I can just come in here and brute force say, I want it 44 pixels tall. Very specific size. And that might be close to what I have. Is it likely that I hit the exact thing? I don't think that's likely. Make it 50. I guess I got lucky. That was pretty bizarre. All right. But you can get very granular with it. In terms of always having it look the same on every screen, using pixels to control your font size is really the preferred way, folks. Word to the wise, because that size will stay consistent on every screen. Does it look better? Yeah, it looks a little better. You can tell it's a title now. Let's try a couple more. Text indent. So what does that one do? That moves the first line in on an indent. All right. How about, I'm not going to demonstrate that one. How about text decoration? And I'll show you where I use that one most often. Notepad. There we go. So let's do this on an ordered list. So I'll paste in text decoration, and I'll say underline. That's one of them. Save it. Back to the browser. We're going to do a refresh, and where we're going to see that is down here. So you see how all these are underlined now? Now, you guys notice that all the menu items are underlined? I'm going to tell you why. It's a pet peeve of mine as a designer that links always have to be underlined. I don't like it. I don't think it looks good. So one thing I almost do standard on all my websites that I do is I'll have a thing for all anchor tags, and I'll do this little magic line of code, text decoration, : none. So I don't want any decoration on my anchor links. So now watch what happens to my links. Are they still links? Yep. The question I just got was, is there a way to add a comment to an HTML page? Yes, and here's how you do it. If you're going to add a comment to an HTML page, you have to do it like so. Your bracket, exclamation, dash, dash. Type in whatever you're going to type in, and then go dash, dash, bracket. Here's a catch, though. If you're going to put the comment in your CSS, there's a different approach for it. So that comment won't work inside the CSS. I'll show you that separately. Okay? But that's a comment. Now, comments can be useful, but if you're kind of like taking notes right inside your code, yeah, you can do that. And that's kind of one way you can do it. I always use comments when I try to remember why I did something. I showed you that one trick the other day where whenever I close a div, I do this. Remember that? The other thing I often do with it is sometimes I type in code and I want to try something else. I don't delete my code. I just put comment marks around the whole thing. So I might, like, if I don't like the footer right now, I might do this with it. And that way, it won't render on the page, but I didn't get rid of it. So I can always turn it back on. I'm going to get rid of that because I do want it right now. And I may as well get rid of the nonsense, right? Saving. See if there's any other cool ones we can try. All right. Well, there's text transform. I'm trying to remember what the parameters are for this one. And text transform allows you, for example, to change everything to capital letters. So H2 might be a good one to do that on. So I might like throw that right here, H2. Text transform. And is it uppercase? Capitalize, capitalize. Save. And then watch the H2, this thing. What did it do? It changed the two letters, H and B, to caps. I typed it in lowercase, right? And I think the uppercase is also a thing. Yeah, it is. All right, so if I want it all to be capital letters. Interesting, right? You don't even have to type it in that way. You can just make it that way. You guys know like word processors can do the same thing, right? So it's not like a new idea. But that way you can like take like something that somebody's typed in incorrectly and kind of clean it up a little bit, force it into a format. That's kind of a fun one. There's letter spacing. Let's do that one. With letter spacing, you know, I'll work on that H2 a little bit more. So what I'm going to do, actually, let's do it on the H1. Letter spacing. Watch this. Letter spacing. So there's a default amount of space between each letters, and you can actually change that as well. I forget what the setting is. I think the setting is relative to the height of the font, not the width of the font. So I'm thinking if I do like a 1.1 M, hypothetically 110%, but it's 100% of the height, not the width. So watch what happens. Watch the letters here in the H1. Oops, wrong screen again. Refresh. Ooh, a little much. Let's try like a 0.75. Save, refresh. A little better. But you see how the letters are spread out? So I would actually play with that a little bit until I got like what I wanted. You know, that's not really very pleasing, but I'm being frank. I don't like the look of it. But you know what? You have to play with it a little bit until you get kind of like the feel for what is kind of right. That's not bad. Like the letters a little apart. That's letter spacing. Now you can also do the same thing with word spacing. And I'm just kind of trying an arbitrary value right now, not really knowing exactly how it'll end up. But let's find out. Interesting, right? Real basic stuff. And you know what? That's actually not too bad, I think. Now I'm thinking it needs a background, but you know, whatever. Let's just leave it alone. One more on here I think we could try, and this one is actually worth checking out. And I'm going to apply this one to our H1. But before I do that, I'm actually going to change the color of this back to black. I'm going to basically override it. And then I'm going to throw in text shadow. And this is something that's actually coming new to CSS as of version 3 of CSS, which, you know, 10 years ago, you couldn't do this in CSS. You couldn't create text shadows. You had to actually type it up in like Photoshop, create your drop shadow, make it an image, and then take that image and put it on your page. But now you can kind of do it natively. It's kind of bizarre. This takes a little bit of practice to get used to because it has a bunch of different parameters you have to throw at it. So in terms of pixels, you have to declare the pixel amount of offset for the shadows of a letter. In other words, if I want a letter to cast a shadow, and look like this, like the light's coming from up on top here and casting the shadow this way, I have to know how many pixels of offset horizontally and vertically I'm moving it in order to create the shadow. And then there's the horizontal and vertical offset, and then the amount of diffusion, and then the color of the shadow too. And you can create all sorts of effects with it. So I'm just going to throw in some values that I know work fairly well. I'm going to go 5 pixels, 5 pixels, 5 pixels, and you know what? I'm going to do like, not black, but pretty darn dark, like that. Oops, semicolon. I'm going to save it, and let's take a look at what happens. Watch the Mr. Robot letters as I refresh. They're going to turn black, and then it's going to have a slight shadow underneath it. And that's actually not slight, that's pretty dark. You know, I might say that's a little too dark for my taste, so I might like up that to like, that's a little better. But that creates dimension. And you know what? It's still text. And that's done with CSS. Old days, we have to turn it into a graphic to make that effect. I also noticed that the color of H1 didn't turn black. You guys notice that? Why? I know why. Because we have an inline style here that's overriding it. So you know what I'm going to do? And it also demonstrates something. When the style is attached directly to a tag, it will override the embedded style sheet at the top and any external styles that are placed upon it as well. Sometimes the only way to get stuff to work is to do it inline. I'm also going to take, since I'm taking that style out, why don't I take this background color out, clean up my original tag, and just put the style up here. Okay, get rid of that double click at the end, though. Save it. Should look the same now, except it's black. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. All right, so that was some of the text effects that we have. Okay, so far what we've done is we just use the style and attach it to the name of the tag. So if we want to attach a style to a paragraph, we just say P and then put the style in, right? But sometimes you need to get a little bit more specific and granular. And what we can do is actually get to a number of different levels of this. So far, really, we've only explored the first one, which is to use the element, or HTML tag, to make the selection. I did demonstrate really briefly that you can apply a class or an ID to an object and then also apply a style to it. But there's some rules with those that are pretty important. Let me actually just diverge to the document and my Notepad++ here. I'm going to go full screen with this for right now and demonstrate. First of all, I wanted to style the div down here separately. So I went ahead and I put a class statement in it. Now, a class is just a way to create an identifier for an object, okay? The usage of class allows us to take that same identifier and apply it to multiple objects on the same page. So if I wanted to apply that same class of foot text to my DL up here, I could do that. In fact, because it's a class declaration, I can apply it in multiple spots on the same page. I'm going to save it. Let's take a look at the net result of that. I'm going to scroll down. You can see how text turned white. It's not a very good look on a page like this, but it does demonstrate the effect, right? Two things are becoming white text because they have the same class declaration. Whenever you use a class declaration and you want to style it, there's one little difference, and it's that period at the front of it. Okay? So that period indicates it's a class. And then I use the class name exactly as it's declared in the object, Same uppercase, lowercase, there cannot be spaces. It's got to be the same exact name, but the period in front of it indicates it's a class selector. Now, if you guys remember, way back when, I used an ID selector. Remember that? And I put that div to wrap the whole content of everything we did on that page with the intent of styling it, right? So here's where we're actually going to use it. When I want to style something with an ID, I use a pound sign in front of it instead. And then I use the name I declared, which is what? Wrapper. My curly brackets. Now the one difference between a class and ID is this. A class can be applied to multiple objects on a page. You got 100 objects, I can apply it to 100 objects. Okay? And whatever style I apply to that class will affect all of them. ID, conversely, can only exist once on a page. It must be unique. So I can't find another object on the page and give it an ID of wrapper. The question I often get from people is, can I put a class and an ID on the object? Yes. And interestingly, it's not unusual for people to do this. Not only can I also add a class declaration to this, let's just say that's the name of it, but if I had another declaration called that, I just separate them with spaces. I can apply multiple class declarations to the same object. Okay, you might not see usage for this right now, but let me assure you, it's very useful. And I'll demonstrate as we go. But now, here we are with the wrapper. The wrapper, I know, encapsulates the whole page. So I have to be careful because what I do here is going to kind of like be almost global, the same way the body is. But the first thing I want to do is I want to actually do like a positioning thing. I think this is typically talked about in later chapters. And I don't want my content, because right now, this page isn't also cool simply because my text goes from one side of the screen to the other. I don't like it. I'd like to narrow it up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to declare width. I can do that in a finite size, declaring pixels, or I can do this. I can apply it with a percentage, so it's a percentage of the screen width. All right, I'm going to save it, go back and take a look at what happens. I'll watch the screen. Not exactly what I was hoping for, but it is narrower. Yes? In fact, I might say it could even be narrower than that. So let me make that like a 70%. And then you know what? Wouldn't it look better? So it's a little narrower. Wouldn't it look better if it was in the middle of the screen? Right? So I'm going to use the technique that we already learned. All right, text align center. I'm going to go back and refresh. Oh, no, that's not it. What did that do? It put everything in the middle of the screen. It didn't really center the content. Right? So you know what? Can I control Z that? Well, yeah, you can control Z that. I'm going to get rid of that. That's not what I want. There's actually a technique for this, and this is going to come more in the next chapter. But here's one of the ways to do it. This is one technique. I'll explain what that all means later. But just to get to the point where you can get your pages to go from looking like this to looking like this. Now the content is narrowed up and controlled. And because it's all in the same container, I can also do other things that are kind of globally cool. So I can apply a background color. What would be a good background color for that? No! What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to borrow the body background color because I think that one's kind of okay. Oops. So I'm going to borrow that one. Did I grab the whole line? I think so. Okay. But then I'm going to come up here and change this. You know what? I'm just going to change that to black. Okay, this is going to be a dramatic change, folks. You ready for this? Hey, almost looks like a website. You guys see any problems? Louder? Yeah, you know, what strikes me as being really bad is all the text in the left margin touches the edge of the screen. So I'm giving you guys a little bit of preview here. So one really quick, simple way to fix that is I'm going to add this other styling element called padding to the wrapper. And I'm going to do a padding of, I'm going to be a little conservative right now, just 25 pixels. So what that's going to do is it's going to put 25 pixels of spacing all around the inside of the wrapper. And watch the effect. Okay? Now it's starting to look more like a web page. There's a whole lot more we can do with this. All right, I'm going to go back to our slideshow here. And we played with a lot of this stuff. Played with the ID. There's also this little thing called a descendant selector. And in this book, we don't go too deep into this, but when you go like Web 2 down the road and in some of the other classes, what a descendant selector means in this case is it's really a specificity type of thing. So if I have some sort of an object with an ID of content, and within that object there is a paragraph, that particular paragraph or any paragraph within that object will take on this color. That's what that means. We do have one example in our thing here that we can kind of leverage because I have a footer, right? And then that's got a class here, right? Foot text. If I took this, in fact, I can do it like this. Let's put an ID here. ID equals whatever. Just can't think of anything better right now. Come back up to the top. Create a new style. So it's going to be pound sign, whatever. But I want to just style the paragraph inside of there. Then I can change the color of that to, I don't know, pick something hideous so you know it worked. And then when you go back to your web page and refresh, see how the text turned green. And that's called the descendant selector. And the reason it's called that is because in terms of the hierarchy of the document and how the document is structured, the paragraph, this footer with that ID, the paragraph tag sits inside of it, so it is a child element of the parent element footer. Like footer is a child element of body. And so a lot of times when you want to get really granular about which object you're attaching to, you use those descendant selectors. And yes, you can go more than 2 layers deep. So if I had like an ID and inside of it was a div with a class, and then it had a paragraph, and inside that paragraph was another thing with a tag on it, I could just give the whole listing one by one so I get right to that object. So that's called the descendant selector. Yes, Alex. All right, moving on. All right, now we're going to teach you about this generic little element that's really kind of useful. It's called the span element. And the span element is used to wrap around very specific little things so that you can give them a class or an ID and style them. And this is a little trick I used to use a lot, especially when I did like e-commerce sites. I'll show you an example of what I mean. So I'm looking at Elliot right here, the word Elliot. I'm going to place a span tag around it. And just so you understand, a span tag is similar to a div tag being a generic element. It does not have any styling components attached to it. Its whole purpose is to wrap stuff so you can give it an ID or a class. But I used to do this thing when I would create e-commerce sites where I would, all right, that's not going to be a good one, is it? What color? Because the text is already red, right? But I would throw in these little class statements just to color text. So like if something was on sale, I would put a span tag around it and color it red and make it bold. And then I had these like preset classes I would use. So, you know, color it red, or, you know, I would just give it a name like that. So I'm calling it just blue. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to design a thing for just blue. And I'm just going to make the color blue, just like that. Back to the document, refresh. There it is, and Elliot's blue, right? And then anywhere I wanted to apply that class, I mean, just pick a spot anywhere on the page that has a thing on it, you know? If it already has a tag wrapping it, and I'm just trying to find like a good one to do it with, like maybe here, maybe a DD, I could add class just blue, save it. Let's go back and refresh because you'll see it on the screen. It was just a really quick way to like style things, you know, to make them stand out. Now I use that most often when like there's a product on sale and I want to highlight the price or something. And you'll find a lot of designers create these like little shortcuts when they like create CSS. They get into this habit where they do the same things over and over again, and then often you can take the code that you create and copy it from project to project, and it follows, and you have all your standard set of little shortcuts that you do, and you don't have to recreate them. It's kind of a beautiful thing. That's one of the beauties of this kind of thing. All right. Now we've gotten to this point here, and I do want to take another quick break before we jump in here. So if you guys need to get up and walk around or whatever, go for it. But I just want to take a quick pause. All right, now we're moving on to kind of like what we consider really the optimal approach for doing CSS. So we learned kind of how it operates. We first learned how to put the styles directly in our tags. We also learned that if you put the styles directly in the tags, it overrides the global ones at the top of the document. And the ones at the top of the document, remember, are called embedded style sheets. Some people will call them internal style sheets. Now, while those work, if you're creating a website that, let's say, has a few pages, it's not a big deal. But if you have like 100 pages or 1,000 pages, that happens. It's not really that unusual. The last thing you want to do is if you want to like change the font on all the pages, go through 1,000 pages and change the same line of code over and over again. Completely ridiculous. Right? So they developed a method for adding external style sheets. So we'll create a separate file that will hold all of our styles, and then we'll take each one of our HTML documents and link it to that file. That way, one little code change changes all the pages simultaneously. It's also a great way to make your website look consistent from page to page. Because why? Because you're using the same styles. Right? So it makes a whole lot of sense. All right. Conceptually, how that works is kind of like this. So you create this external file, you put all your CSS code in there, and each one of the pages then has a link back to that document. So this is actually an arrow here, and I don't know if it shows up in the video all too well. All right, in order to do that, we first have to create the document, and then we're going to put a link to the style sheet in the head section of each of our HTML pages. So let's first create the document. I'm just going to go to Notepad++ to start. And I'm just going to create a new document. That's a Control-N from the keyboard. I don't have to do anything weird with it, frankly, but I do want to save it immediately. So I'm going to File, Save As, and I do want to place it. I'm in my Unit 3 folder. It kind of knows where I've been working. I'm going to place it right inside there. I'm going to come down here to the bottom, and I'm just going to type. You can call it whatever you want. Typically what a lot of people call it is styles.css if they only have one style sheet. Kind of doesn't matter, frankly, what you call it, but no spaces, preferably. It is not also unusual to have multiple style sheets. That's kind of a whole separate issue, but always use the CSS file extension if you would. All right, so now we have a document called styles.css. Now I did a whole bunch of work on my index page with all these styles, right? I had a lot of stuff. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to come in here and grab everything from in between the style tags, all of it, and I'm going to cut it and remove it. And I'm going to go over to my style sheet and paste it. Boom. Now notice I did not bring the style tags with me. You know why? You don't need to. No, it's not how you link it. But that's a good question. So I'm actually going to functionally remove that because I'm not using it at all. But what we do need to do is create a link like what they're showing here. In fact, if you don't want to type it, see, this must be a graphic because I can't. All right. So there's a couple different little elements that you have to type in here. So here's the basic syntax of it. First, you put in link, and then you put in this rel tag, which stands for, how is this related to this? And we're going to say it's a style sheet. And then we also put in an href like we do for our links. And then we're going to call the name of the file. Since it's inside the same folder, all I have to do is type the file name. And now the style sheet is linked. I'm going to save it. I also have to make sure my style sheet is saved. Okay, saved. Now I'm going to go back to my browser. I'm going to reload the same page. And if no changes happen, look, change because I was looking at the old version, but yeah, that's the right thing, right? It is. Now, watch this, folks. If you right-click View Source on this, you notice that the style sheet is linked up there. Guess what? You can go to it and take a look. You can do that on anybody's website, by the way. No guessing how they did it. That's all right there. Going back to 100% Zoom. So that's how you do an external style sheet. Now, here's the other thing that really you should do here. We also have a contact page, right, that we created. Why don't we go ahead and open that in Notepad++. And then, you notice I already put a wrapper in there. And really it has almost the same structure. I can add that same link here. In fact, I don't even need to type it, right? I can just come to my index document, copy that line of code, go over to my contact document, make sure it's in the head section, not in the body section, drop in the link, save it, and now when I refresh the page here and I go to contact us, watch contact us. It looks the same. That's pretty groovy, isn't it? So now if I want to add a whole bunch of pages to my site, and I want them to all look the same, well, the index page already has a lot of junk on it. But I could just copy, like, parts of my site here. So, for example, I could take this contact page, and I could save it as, for example, about, right? Save it. And, you know, I might want to actually, you know, say this is the about page, so I know that it's actually a different page. Right? Has the same link to the style sheet, has the same structure, all the same elements. So now in the browser, I can go to about, I can go to contact, I can go back home. Same structure, same look. So I'm hoping that like lights up a couple things in your brain. So this allows us now, if I go, oh my God, you know that red text, I hate it, right? Now I can just go to my style sheet, excuse me, and where am I declaring that red text? All the paragraphs are red. Wrong answer, right? What color am I going to choose? I'm going to choose something close to black. And you know what? Maybe we'll make it kind of grayish. Maybe we'll do all sixes or something. Save it. So style sheet is saved. It just changed one little snippet of text. Refresh. That page is different. This page is different. I just changed 3 pages all at once. One little line code of change. All right, I'm going back to the slideshow here because I think I covered a lot with what I just did. All right, so then, you know, if they go through and hey, look what they just showed you. I showed you how to like center the content and narrow it up. They just showed you the same thing. All right, so I kind of knew it was coming. I just did it a little bit earlier than they did. All right, let's talk about the cascade for CSS real quick. So whatever your browser does by default, if you don't put any styling elements in, will be overridden first by your external style sheet. But then if I have a style that's embedded in the top of a page, that will, if it conflicts with the external, the internal or embedded style sheet will then kick in. And we already saw that if there's a tag or style directly on the tag, that overrides all of them. So the more specific the style is applied, the more it overrides the global. And you can kind of leverage that, and it takes a little bit of practice. So if you start getting effects that's like, why isn't this changing colors? Always go look at the tag and then back out to the point where you see where it might actually have been affected. The other thing that you can do is don't forget that the W3C, W3 schools, whatever, they also have a CSS validator just like they have an HTML validator. Sometimes, you know, it's easy to make mistakes. If you use a good tool, not that Notepad++ is the best tool, and let's say you forget, like, for example, the semicolon. You see how the line below it changed colors? It's kind of a little bit of a tip that something's broken. Or if you forget, you know, the closing curly bracket and stuff's not working, it's just little things like that that you want to check on. So don't forget that there's a validator and use it. All right. We went through a lot of stuff in this chapter, right? Once again. And I'm going to tell you what, I'm having like these really strong feelings about changing your homework, folks. All right? And has anybody started on chapter 3 or 4 yet? Okay, good. When I get home later tonight or early tomorrow, I'm going to be changing the homework, and I think I'm going to be splitting chapter 4 out to its own unit. So I just want to like prepare you guys for that. So don't work on chapter 4 homework yet. You will still need to do Java Jam and Fish Creek. I also have this other assignment thrown in there called the launch page, and I'm going to move that to unit 4 as well. Okay? So please don't proceed with that homework. If you're already done with chapter 2 and unit 2, work on the chapter 3 case study for Fish Creek and Java Jam. You guys clear with that? All right, I'm saying it verbally right now, going into the video too, which I probably shouldn't have done because other semesters it won't make sense. But I'm telling you guys here in class so that you know. Okay.